Alrighty, welcome back, everybody. So we've got a few more minutes of Q&A here. So if you've got a question that you generated in your pairs just now, go ahead and raise your hand. And I will try to also scan the room for physically raised hands. And if you know who your question is for, Terry or Matt, go ahead and say so. If not, they will delegate. Who has a question? Oh, I see Judy. Go ahead. Oh, you're on mute.
We discussed the parking issues and the size of the units going on a property, because there wasn't very much space for people to enjoy the outdoors if you had a lot of units on a piece of property or a large fourplex that took up the whole, most of the property. And then we were concerned about the lack of, everyone has almost everybody has an automobile, and they were going to want to have a place to place their automobile. And if they have company, they want people to use theirs. So that's their, I guess we're supposed to be asking questions, right?
Yeah, we'll have lots of time for comments later on.
Yeah, so yeah. Mostly concerned about the size of, without having extra space around it. I guess that's, if you're talking about putting a lot of houses in one property, are you going to have more space for these people to enjoy their life outdoors as well? That's my question.
I'll just say one quick thing, which is that one of the standards that we look at is the percentage of the lot that's covered by buildings. And we're recommending really not changing that too much. It's currently 50%. So we're recommending retaining that in most places. So that means 50% of the property is covered by a building, and half of it is and half of it isn't. So for what that's worth, that provides a certain amount of space around the building, or in front of or behind the building, or between the buildings if there's multiple buildings on a lot. So I would just note that, and just fair comment on both of those things.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And I see Sammy. Go ahead.
Yeah, we were talking about cottage, particularly like pertaining to cottage clusters, but having like something of a parking garage, or like I guess the word would be like communal parking garage, like something that multiple lots would have access to in order to reduce the need for street parking and the amount of space that takes up on the lot. Just to, because more levels, I guess that the more cars can park and the higher things are, that keeps things consolidated. I was wondering, particularly to Matt, since Terry has kind of, Rosita, I think you're on mute.
Yes, sorry, I'm trying to.
You're okay. But yeah, we were just wondering, it was so chaotic. We were just wondering kind of how that would fit into the picture, and if, you have any thoughts on that, and I don't know, what you envision, I suppose.
So when you say garage, do you mean actually like a multi-story structure, or you just mean kind of a building where multiple cars could park on kind of the ground floor of it? Just so I make sure I understand.
Yeah, I guess a garage could be any of those things. I was personally envisioning a multi-story garage, just because I feel like that would be more, that would respond more to cottage clusters, given that there are multiple people living there. And that would also respond to the earlier statement of like, people need, extra parking spots maybe. So I was thinking a multi-story garage, and not fully covered, just, with the ceiling.
So a couple quick things, and then Terry might have something to add. One of the sort of general ideas behind the cottage cluster type of housing is that you do group parking in a specific part of the property, so that you do actually consolidate it in one part of the property, and that parking can be simply surface parking, or it can be parking within a shared garage or shared carport kind of structure. So the standards would allow for that. I think the reality is, given the size of most of these cottage cluster type developments we're talking about, building a multi-story garage for any kind of parking is extremely expensive. It's one of the reasons that that just doesn't get built in a lot of places because of the cost. It's anywhere from, I see figures 25 to 40,000 bucks per car to build structured parking. So I think the reality is that would increase the cost of that development, particularly for a small development, beyond what would be sort of financially feasible to develop. It works when you've got a lot of units and you can spread the cost out among them, but it's a lot harder when it's a smaller development. So I don't know if that helps. And Terry, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Well, just that the one nuance was we talked in the small group about grouping several cottages around on a bigger development site. And so I didn't know how much room there was in the rules for multiple cottage clusters kind of to be grouped around a common parking area or something like that.
That's what I was thinking.
That's a great question. There's definitely the ability to have multiple clusters in a cottage cluster development. So that's certainly an option. And that question did come up during the model code writing. And I think one of the things we did was say, if you've got more cottages or more clusters, you can have larger groups of parking spaces. But whether or not the rules would allow for sort of one really large bunch of parking spaces for multiple clusters, that I'm not sure. And I have to kind of take a look back and see. But that's a really good question.
Okay, thank you.
Also going to say what might get to a little bit more to what you're trying to get at as far as like grouping things and density is that the cottage cluster is kind of limited because of its height. But for the townhouse, you could have your car parked in the bottom of the townhouse and you could have a little more height by, stacking your unit up above that, because you were talking about trying to get height and the cars enclosed. So the townhouse has a little bit more of that ability.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Jennifer. And I'm sorry, I've got to cut us off now because we are a minute overdue for our break. I apologize, Robert. Raise your hand right at 7:30. But thank you for the questions. Thank you, consultants and city staff for being here with us. And we're going to take a break until 7:45. And then when we get back, we're going to dive into deliberating on all of the information that you've just received. 7:46. Thanks.
Add a minute.
Yeah,
Thanks, everybody.
Take away even a single minute of break. Enjoy your break, everyone.